Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring Cultos Innombrables. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, featuring this role-playing game where you play as the cultist instead of the typical Lovecraftian investigator, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time, I am going to continue talking about the character creation process, starting with skills. This is a point distribution system, or part of the process. You distribute a number of points among categories of broad skills. That is, you have suggestions on how to handle skills in a general sense, such as combat, stealth, but you can come up with any skill imaginable to further specialize or customize your character. You have different values for this skill. If you have, let's say, a value of 2, you somewhat practice the skill, it's almost kinda like a hobby. If you have a value of 6, you are actually a qualified professional. Your skills are in high demand. Maybe you have a value of 9. You are probably the best at what you do in your country, perhaps one of the best in the world. So it's all about that customization. This system of milestones proposes a number of general skills, a sort of catch-all way of handling any situation in the game. So you have physical skills, such as running, jumping, climbing, this is a single category. You also have the combat skill, such as, martial arts, shooting. There's also the interaction skill. That is how you get along or interact with other characters within the game, within the setting. Then you have perception. That is being aware of what is happening around you. You also have subterfuge. This is stealth, hiding, and such. You also have culture. This is related to science, education. There's also profession, which has to do with somewhat more narrow bodies of knowledge. Then you have occult. This is about the lore of what is hidden from the everyday man's view or perception of things. So this is related to sorcery, wizardry, at least as it is treated in the Mythos of Lovecraft. And then you have arcane ability. This is about casting spells. So your character could be knowledgeable in different occult tidbits, lore, data, information, but maybe that character is not capable of casting spells. So these are separate categories. And if you have a certain number of points invested in the occult knowledge and arcane abilities, you will start with a higher degeneration score. We will talk about that in a few moments. Now you could be thinking, what if your character doesn't know anything about a particular skill? Maybe your character is not specialized in driving or swimming. Well, when it comes to everyday activities, unless there is some reason related to your character's background, you can do all of those things. You can drive, you can swim, but when it comes to investing points in those particular skills, that means that you are exceptionally good at that, or at least a bit better than the average person. So a lot of people can drive, but only some people can chase down another car at high speed, or perhaps escape from someone. And when it comes to swimming, maybe you know how to float around, you know how to swim, somewhat. But if you invest enough points in that, maybe you can swim in very dangerous waters. So it's not that you are completely ignorant in those skills that are not registered in your character sheet. It's just that you only have certain notions on how to do a particular task or carry out an activity. Now, when it comes to this specialization, this role-playing game expects that you do not try to play the system, or that you are not some sort of power player or power gamer. It must be related to your character's background. So for example, maybe you want to put some points in combat. A power player could be playing as a professor, and suddenly he says that the professor has the skill of commando fighting. That means the professor character is able to use knives and firearms, explosives, because he's just that skilled or knowledgeable. But that wouldn't make any sense if that professor character didn't receive some sort of special training, or maybe survived in some dangerous environment. Maybe he was part of a military or paramilitary group. So it needs to make sense with your background. Maybe the college professor took boxing as a hobby or as a sport, and you have a certain ability in that regard. Or maybe you say that your character is an expert in disguise, a master of disguise, because that character was an actor or participated in different plays, stage performances. So perhaps your character is a master of disguise because of that background. It makes sense. So the game expects you to come up with your own skills. In the case of interaction, maybe your character is an expert when it comes to etiquette or protocol. And when it comes to perception, maybe your character is really good at reading body language. So it's all about that background of your character. You are not going to be investing points in a general way, even though these are broad categories. You always give a name to the skill that you are writing down on your character sheet. Then we have drama points. These are the points that you can spend to escape certain dangerous situations, to be better at different tasks. So during the game, the player characters can use these points to activate aspects or evade the activation of certain aspects. We will talk about these mechanics in a future part of this review. The interesting thing about drama points is that you can swap these points or spend them to be better at different things, that is in skills, or have better attributes, but of course that means that you will begin with less drama points, so you can exchange that currency or resource. Then you have derived stats that apply to a number of situations, such as toughness, resistance, defense, initiative, bonuses to damage, steadfastness or serenity, mental stability, and degeneration. As I said earlier, if you have too many points in the occult, in the arcane abilities, then you begin with higher degeneration. If you are not careful, your character will be tainted, will suffer mutations, physical or mental or spiritual, I guess you could say, when you delve deeper into the mysteries of the mythos. If you end up too mutated, too changed by the mythos, then your character is lost, and that character becomes a non-player character controlled by the game director or the game master. Then you choose a complication. This is a quirk or a flaw that gets you into trouble when it comes to different situations throughout the game. There is a positive thing though. If your character gets into trouble because of a complication, you obtain a drama point. In this rulebook, there are a few sample characters, so you can start playing right away. For example, you have Simon Wothershire. He's an independent scholar in exile. When it comes to his milestones, his pregnant sister died during a fire in Cairo, and he had to abandon his beloved London, fleeing from the dilettante cult of Van Weyden. His complication is that he is quite arrogant and treats everyone like children. Then we have Michelle Devereaux. She is an urban survivor. When it comes to milestones, she used to be a young student, quite carefree until she lost everything to Hurricane Katrina, and she had to do unspeakable things in order to survive. We also have Jason Scott White. Now this is a very interesting character. This is a redneck hungry for knowledge, but he is related to the expansion of this game. It's a sort of campaign called Fundido en Blanco. In English it translates to melted into white. So he is supposed to be a member of a family of hillbillies that are quite degenerate. They are this sort of small community where there is obvious inbreeding, and they have this cult, and obviously they serve a certain branch of the mythos. So when it comes to milestones, his mother tried to keep him away from the rest of the family, but they eventually made contact with him. He also murdered a journalist that was digging too deep into the family background. When it comes to complication, he has tasted human flesh and he loved it. So as you can see, you have a variety of different characters. Some of them are criminals, some of them are dilettantes, some of them don't even know how to cast Mythos spells. They have just joined your group or your cult because they want to obtain some sort of advantages. They could serve as the muscles for the group, or they could be knowledgeable in getting into places using their technical expertise, their social capabilities, but most of the characters here know at least one spell, so they have various or varying degrees of degeneration. Now, at the end of this section, you have Legado or Legacy. This is a short story. It was somewhat disappointing when compared to the first one. I think the first short story included in this rulebook was great, but the next one was not so good, and this one is a bit disappointing, but at least it's better than the other one featuring Nyarlathotep. In the case of the Legacy, you have this rich family, this senator, that decided to put one of his sons in a mental institution. So the brother, that is the other son, decides to visit his brother in the institution, and he goes into the place. The description gets a bit confusing, but when he eventually reaches his brother, he notices that his brother has changed too much. For anyone that has read any Lovecraftian story related to, for example, the Great Race, knows that perhaps this unfortunate guy has been taken over by one of those entities. He's building this sort of apparatus or machine using anything that he can find in the asylum. Because he's the son of a senator, he has access to the more advanced or more luxurious parts of the installation. So he takes out televisions and circuitry and all of that, and he builds this strange device. He starts to talk what the brother considers to be nonsense, but eventually his brother notices that this being is no longer the son of the senator. He's something else. And eventually, through the use of this apparatus, he kinda summons a Vyaki. Maybe, perhaps, the description of the creature is somewhat strange, but it seems to be a Vyaki. So he summons this sort of flying creature to take him away from the mental institution, and giving some cryptic messages to the brother that came to visit about something that is going to happen, some great event or cataclysm, and then he just disappears, but he leaves behind the body of the brother. And then the brother that was thought to be insane suddenly wakes up and asks his brother what he is doing here, what is going on. So it's obvious that that human was being controlled by this alien entity. So the story, while it isn't bad, it's just too normal, so to speak, or too typical for a Mythos story. There's nothing in it that gets you fascinated about what happened before or what is about to happen. So it's a bit too stereotypical in my opinion. You do have that quirky behavior of the controlled or possessed brother. He's actually completely naked when he is building the apparatus. But besides that, it just felt like a typical Mythos situation. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part, we are going to talk about the rules of the game, the system, the milestones system. When it comes to the character creation process, I really like it. It's certainly not a system that is focused on winning the game. It's leaning more towards storytelling. They expect you to take your character's background and build all of the other aspects of your character based on that personal history. There will be times for strategies and tactics, but it's all about creating your character without taking into consideration those challenges ahead. You're not going to be taking different skills and abilities in order to survive the game. You are taking those skills and abilities to represent your character's personality, his life, his upbringing, his or her journey through the world, so that you can take on future challenges, employing those background related resources. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you who have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.